The sun dipped below the horizon, blanketing our suburban haven with the kind of serene twilight that promised peace. Yet, in the heart of this idyllic neighborhood, where every lawn was trimmed with military precision and mailboxes stood like obedient soldiers, a storm was brewing, one that went unnoticed by everyone except those who lived beneath its brewing clouds. I had always loved my house on Maple Street. It was my refuge, a place where the world outside could be held at bay. The neighborhood was quiet, almost too quiet, like the silence that precedes a symphony. But beneath that calm surface, shadows lurked, personified most vividly by Karen from the HOA. Karen was the kind of neighbor who cataloged peccadillos as a hobby. Her universe was held together by a covenant of rules, bylaws, and an unyielding belief that order must be maintained at all costs. In Karen's world, deviations were punishable offenses. It began innocuously enough. A note slipped under my door, a reminder unsigned but unmistakably hers. My Wi-Fi name was, apparently, inappropriate. It wasn't, really. It was a harmless pun, a play on words that offered a small laugh to those who stumbled upon it. But Karen's world did not allow for such levity. I found it curious. After all, her note bore no teeth, just an implied sneer and the smell of gardenias, her preferred fragrance. Her complaint was petty, like a fly buzzing insistently in an otherwise perfect room. I shrugged it off, changed the name, changed the password, simple as that. Life continued in its predictable rhythm, until it didn't. An itch grew in Karen's mind, one that couldn't be scratched with notes alone. Her surveillance shifted from the abstract to the personal, mail intercepted, as though my correspondence harbored secrets that could topple her meticulous order. Glances from behind curtains, eyes, like hawks, predatory and keen. She wore her power like a poorly fitted coat, straining its seams, her eyes always searching for the next infraction. I was a puzzle piece that wouldn't fit, a corner that dared to curl up when her picture demanded flatness. I noticed her patrols intensifying, her footsteps crunching on gravel like a metronome. She moved with the determination of a ship's captain navigating troublesome waters, her path a calculated vector through our neighborhood's quiet sea. What she didn't realize was that her fixation had exposed her own fault lines. My presence had become a mirror, reflecting her own insecurities, her fears of losing control. Her need to dominate was a beacon, casting light on the shadowed corners of her soul. I watched her from my porch, sipping a glass of iced tea as the last light faded. Her movements were those of a restless spirit, tethered to a cause no one else understood or cared for. It was painfully ironic that her scrutiny illuminated more about her than it ever did about me. I had always believed in the power of quiet resistance. My existence was a testament to patience, to the idea that sometimes the loudest voice is the one that remains silent. I didn't have to fight her battles. I only had to endure, to observe, because in Karen's relentless quest for order, she was about to open a door she couldn't close. A scandal lay buried beneath our manicured lawns, whispering its secrets to the roots that spread so eagerly through the soil, and in her fervent quest for control, Karen would be the one to unearth it. The real story was just beginning. The sun cast long shadows across my lawn as I stared at the neatly trimmed hedges lining our street. It might have been just another day in suburbia, but the air bristled with a tension that had nothing to do with the weather. Karen had decided to escalate the situation, and the neighborhood was her stage. I had changed my Wi-Fi password after a tip from a tech-savvy friend. Security, he'd called it, harmless. Really, but to Karen, it was an invitation to unleash her fury. Her response had been swift and calculating, like a hawk spotting a rabbit in an open field. The first sign of trouble appeared in the form of a neatly folded letter slipped under my door. It bore the emblem of the Homeowners Association, a symbol that had become synonymous with Karen's iron grip on our community. Inside, the usual polite phrasing barely masked the venom. An alleged violation. Grass too long by exactly half an inch. A technicality at best, yet weighted with the full force of community disapproval. I chuckled quietly, petty. But Karen wasn't content to stop there. She had a whole arsenal of absurd rules at her disposal. Next came the citations, minutiae magnified to the point of absurdity, trash cans too far from the curb by a foot, barely perceptible paint chips on the mailbox, and a bird feeder that suddenly violated regulations despite being in place since I moved in. It seemed as if every day brought a new notice, each one more trivial than the last. The neighborhood grapevine buzzed with whispers, the backyard fences serving as conduits for gossip. She was orchestrating it all, letting rumors ripple through our streets like ripples in a pond. Each absurdity she concocted was designed to isolate me, to cast me as the non-conforming other in a sea of uniformity. I watched her work with a kind of detached amusement. The more she pushed, the more the absurdity of it all became apparent. Her tactics were as transparent as glass, yet they were effective in their subtlety. Fear of nonconformity was a powerful tool, and Karen wielded it like a maestro. But then I uncovered something she hadn't anticipated. While her attention was consumed with pettiness, she hadn't noticed the crack in her own facade, a glitch in her perfect world. It began with a casual conversation with a neighbor. Strange, he'd said, how the landscaping budget had doubled. The community flower beds had seen no such transformation. His words hung in the air like smoke, curling into an uncomfortable truth. I did some digging, quietly, away from Karen's prying eyes. The numbers didn't add up. Expenditures routed through obscure names, funds disappearing into the ether. It was a tangled web, as deceptive as her smile. The scandal was real, and it was hers. Karen might have been the queen of citations, but I had uncovered the rot beneath her throne. As I mulled over my findings, I felt the tide beginning to shift. Irony, that great equalizer, was on my side. And in the quiet of my living room, I knew the game was about to change. The sun hung low, casting elongated shadows across the cul-de-sac. When I finally sat down at my desk, a quiet determination guiding my hand across the paper, Karen's outburst from earlier in the day lingered in my mind like a pesky mosquito, its incessant buzz refusing to fade. The memory of her shrill complaints over a Wi-Fi password change replayed with an odd rhythm, like a ridiculous refrain to which I had involuntarily danced. It was time to document everything, the complaints, the accusations, the insinuations. Each incident I recorded felt like a small liberation, a way to reclaim ownership over my narrative. Karen's tirade might have seemed petty on the surface, but beneath it lay the ugly undercurrent of her real motive control, masked under the guise of neighborhood concern. I had long suspected there was more beneath the polished surface of the HOA's operations. Karen's explosive reaction over something as trivial as a Wi-Fi password had opened a door I hadn't even thought to approach. As I compiled my notes, a pattern began to emerge. Little details, innocuous on their own, formed a tapestry of distraction and deceit. I had always been the watchful observer, the one who listened more than he spoke, who saw through the cracks in facades. As I pieced the puzzle together, the realization hit with a sharp clarity that HOA's funds were being mismanaged, or, worse, siphoned. The calm of my room was a sharp contrast to the storm that brewed outside, both literally and metaphorically. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a low growl of discontent echoing my own. I felt the irony keenly. Karen, the self-proclaimed guardian of order, had unwittingly led me to the real disorder. I crafted my response carefully, with the precision of an artist chiseling away at marble, revealing the form beneath the stone. My letter to the HOA board was a symphony of understatement and evidence, each point a quiet crescendo building to a revelation. I didn't need to shout to be heard. The truth was loud enough. As I sealed the envelope, a small smile tugged at the corners of my lips. It was a smile born not of triumph, but of quiet resolve. I had no need for confrontation. The facts were now a silent army marching toward an inevitable reckoning. In the coming days, I knew there would be fallout, whispers in the corridors, sidelong glances, perhaps even another outburst from Karen. But I was ready. I had faced storms before, and like the trees outside swaying gently in the rising wind, I knew how to bend without breaking. The rain began to patter softly against the window pane as I placed the letter in the outgoing mail slot. The rhythm was soothing, a gentle accompaniment to the hum of anticipation that thrummed beneath my skin. Tomorrow would come, as it always did, carrying with it the weight of consequence. But for now, I allowed myself a moment of peace, a pause in the eye of the storm. I turned off the desk lamp, casting the room into a soft, forgiving darkness. As I lay back, the ceiling above seemed to breathe with possibility. Karen had exploded over a changed Wi-Fi password, but she had ignited something far more significant, a spotlight on the shadows. And, as they say, truth had a way of coming to light, casting everything in a new, unflinching clarity. The morning sun filtered through my blinds, casting stripes of light across the floor like a barcode waiting to be scanned. I sat at my desk, a cup of coffee in hand, the steam curling upward in lazy spirals. Across the street, Karen's house stood like a fortress, her curtains drawn tight, the closed blinds a barrier against the world, or perhaps a cage for herself. It had been a week since the incident over the Wi-Fi password, a trivial spark that had ignited the dry brush of neighborhood tension. Her voice, shrill and insistent, still echoed in my mind, but the noise had settled into a curious silence, a silence that, like the calm before a storm, promised something more. A month ago, I'd stumbled upon something intriguing, a series of financial discrepancies buried deep within the HOA records, small numbers that didn't add up, like puzzle pieces from different sets forced together. Karen's name appeared more often than chance would dictate, linked to decisions that benefited a select few. I wasn't surprised, yet the revelation felt like the sharp crack of ice beneath my feet, unexpected and chilling. The plan was simple, quiet, like the whisper of wind through leaves. I gathered evidence, each piece fitting into the larger picture. There was a beauty in the meticulousness required, a symphony composed of numbers and facts. I reached out to an attorney, someone discreet, whose reputation for integrity was as solid as the foundation of my home. Together, we assembled a case, crafting a narrative that exposed the rot at the heart of our little community. The legal process was a slow dance, each step deliberate and careful. Documents were filed, motions submitted, all without raising the eyebrows of our neighbors. This was not a crusade, nor a quest for vengeance. It was justice, pure and simple, as cool and refreshing as the morning dew. I kept my interactions with Karen minimal, our exchanges reduced to nods of acknowledgement. She eyed me with suspicion, her gaze flitting over me like a moth around a flame. She must have sensed the shift, the imperceptible change in the air, the way a seasoned sailor knows when the wind is about to change. It was an ordinary Tuesday when the mail arrived, an unassuming envelope among the usual stack of bills and junk. Inside, the official seal of the court, a date, a time, a place, the culmination of weeks of quiet effort, the moment when the surface would shatter, revealing the currents that ran beneath. I imagined Karen's reaction when she received her own letter, a flash of anger, perhaps, or disbelief. Her world tilted on its axis. I wondered if she would finally see the web of her making, the strands tangled in her hands. I felt no triumph, only a sense of inevitability. The truth was like a river carving its path through stone, unstoppable, patient. I was merely the guide, directing its course. I looked out the window, watching as a gust of wind scattered leaves across the road, swirling them into a dance. Change was coming, as certain as the seasons, and I was ready. In the distance, a car door slammed. Karen emerged, her expression unreadable, the letter clutched in her hand. She paused, glanced my way, and for a moment, our eyes met, a silent acknowledgement of the journey we had unwillingly shared. She turned away, retreating into her house. The door snapping shut behind her like the final click of a lock. I watched her leave, then turned back to my coffee, its warmth a comforting weight in my hands. The story was far from over, but for now, I savored the quiet victory, its echoes resonant and profound. The tension in our small neighborhood had become as thick as the summer humidity, clinging to every word and glance exchanged. Ever since Karen's outburst over my innocuous Wi-Fi update, a simple change from password 123 to something a tad less guessable. The air crackled with an uncomfortable awareness, a silent acknowledgement that something had shifted. Karen had always been the puppet master, pulling at the strings of the homeowners association with the precision of a skilled violinist. Her control was absolute, her demands often unreasonable, but met with little resistance. That day, though, her tirade about my audacious decision to secure my own network had nudged a delicate balance off its perch. It was a curious thing, how such a small act could tip the scales, revealing the hidden weights beneath. I hadn't intended to become the catalyst for change. I simply wanted to watch Netflix without interruptions. But as the neighbors rallied around me, some out of genuine support, others perhaps relishing the schadenfreude of Karen's fall seeds of doubt sprouted in the manicured lawns of our suburban enclave. Unbeknownst to Karen, or perhaps because of her willful ignorance, I had discovered something far more nefarious. In the midst of her public eruption, her anger had slipped its mask, revealing glimpses of financial manipulations that danced just beneath the surface of the HOA's pristine facade. It was an accidental discovery, like finding a hidden door in a house you've lived in for years, its creak barely audible over the noise of daily life. I'd seen the files, caught a glimpse of the discrepancies, a ledger where there shouldn't have been one, simple numbers that didn't quite add up, whispering tales of funds misallocated and projects inflated. It was always the little things left unnoticed by those ensnared in Karen's web. Those who had grown complacent or weary from fighting. I had no such history, only a fresh perspective and, admittedly, a penchant for solving puzzles. And so, I followed the trail. It led me through labyrinthine meetings and hushed conversations, through layers of deceit as thick as the bonds of friendship that held some neighbors too close to Karen to see clearly. Her empire was built on trust, and trust, once fractured, never mends the same way. The day it all came to light was one of those rare, clear mornings when the sky seemed impossibly blue, and the world felt poised on the brink of revelation. The community gathered, drawn by a mixture of curiosity and a quiet, collective hope for something different. They looked at me, the outsider who had inadvertently become their champion, with expressions that ranged from cautious optimism to skeptical reserve. In the end, it was simple. Numbers don't lie. And the truth has a way of insisting on itself. Like the persistent bloom of dandelions in an untouched field, Karen was left with little more than her indignation, her empire crumbling at her feet like a sandcastle at high tide. The neighborhood, once silent under her reign, found its voice. Decisions began to reflect a newfound unity, a shared vision untainted by manipulation. I marveled at the irony. A password change had been the key, unlocking not just my Wi-Fi, but a community shackled by its own inertia. Karen, now sidelined, watched from the edges, her presence a mere shadow of the woman she once was. The neighborhood thrived. And I, the accidental instigator, found solace in the quiet restoration of order. In the end, it was never about the Wi-Fi. It was about connection.